Come in, go Big 12 or go home. The boys are back. Brandon Shanahan, of course, with Iowa Broadcasting legend Drew Russell. Drew, what a weekend of college football. Uh, uh, yeah, I mean, that's all I can say. What a weekend. I feel like I say that every weekend, but this weekend in particular, I can't believe it.
Remember like when we felt like maybe we were starting to piece together kind of an idea of what a Big 12 championship game would look like, or, if teams went out, we're done, we have an idea. Well, I'll tell you
Yeah,
what, the
I do
ghost
remember.
of the king himself, Gustavo Fring, aka Gus Malzahn, he just said, you know what, Oklahoma State, I know you're red hot. I know we haven't played well, but we're still going to beat you by 42 at home. And what was once Oklahoma State, who still has control of that destiny, but that margin just got gone. It's no longer available for a margin of error. That was just stunning.
I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, that was crazy. TCU almost had an absurd comeback against Texas. That was off the rails. You got Iowa State taking care of their business against BYU. Texas Tech,
They,
stunning.
fi- they
Just
figured
going
it
on the
out.
road, figured it out. Looked like the team that everybody thought that we'd see in the preseason from a competitive standpoint, and they find a way to, one more win gets them bowl eligibility. Uh, just a crazy week. K-State cruises. A lot of narratives this week, Brandon. That's all I know. A lot of narratives after this 7-game slate.
And probably the biggest narrative, at least in the Big 12 sphere, and we talked about it this time last week, Drew. We thought we had pretty good clarity. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
Oklahoma State's gonna have 3 games where they're pretty big favorites. Texas is gonna have 3 games where they're gonna be pretty big favorites. All they have to do is win their games, and then bada bing, bada boom, they meet in Arlington, an all-orange Big 12 championship game. Oklahoma State goes and ruins that, and now the whole conference is in shambles because they weren't prepared for this.
No.
They mentioned it. The key word that they keep using is clarity. They're trying to create clarity within the tiebreaker scenarios because they kind of fucked up on it pretty big. Where it's
Yeah.
the first tiebreaker is head to head. So if Brandon and Drew were are tied for second place with one spot in the Big 12 championship on the line, whoever won head to head is the first criteria tiebreaker.
Yeah.
Now that gets thrown out the window when there's a third entity. So there's Shandon Branahan. He comes into the fold. Then you throw, according to the rules, you throw the tiebreaker, the head-to-head tiebreaker, out the window. Then it's just a combination of record winning percentages against common opponents. They even throw in strength of schedule somewhere in there. But where that's kind of coming into Hayes is there's a good to fair chance that we end up with a 3-team pod of Oklahoma State, Kansas State, and Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
And Oklahoma State beat both of those teams. So in theory, because of the head-to-head precedence, how the rule should have been written is that that should be exhausted till all possibilities. It's not. So now there's a good to fair chance. And I think someone did the tiebreakers where now Oklahoma State doesn't quite have the inside track on those teams because of those other factors like winning percentage and some other analytics. So they're getting clarity here, and there's kind of murmurs of them, which would be crazy, changing the rule mid-November with 2 weeks left in the season, which would be crazy. I mean, they'd be getting it right. I mean, that's how the rule should be. But to change the criteria for the conference championship game 3 weeks before the conference championship game is probably a peak Big 12.
It's peak college football. I mean, this is like college football in a nutshell right now. It is sheer chaos across the board. I mean, we've got, interim Michigan coaches crying tears saying Jim Harbaugh was like set up. That's how I felt after watching that post-game interview on Saturday. I'm like, this man, Jim Harbaugh, is going to weep to the press, and he's trying to get sympathy here, and he's not getting it from me, but
I had to check
who
Twitter. I'm
knows?
like, did Jim Harbaugh die? Is that
That's
what
what I
I
thought.
and Brandon Walker brought this up earlier in the year when they had their shenanigans. Like Mississippi State fans they weren't this dramatic when Mike Leach actually died, let alone like nobody went on national television crying after a win against Penn State. Like it's so
Right.
dramatic.
No, 100% true. It's, you have that, but this Big 12 conference championship game where they're struggling to make sure that they have everything on target and on par when, there are quite a few months in the football off season, Brandon. You do realize that from about mid-January to traditionally late August or early September, there's no football play. We have the recruiting, spring game, off-season workouts, but there's no football played. So for those 7+ months, they have an opportunity to, make. They decide, what, we're going to wait, let the season go, and then very late with a couple weeks to go. Oh, you know what? Actually, never mind. We're gonna change these rules. Just crazy, potentially.
It's crazy. Potentially, I have a feeling that they're just gonna bite the bullet and let the rules stand because it would be very crazy to change their criteria this late in the season, even though it would, in theory, be the right thing.
Yes.
Because it would be very silly for Oklahoma State to be there tied with Kansas State and Oklahoma at the end of the year. And we beat both of these teams head to head, and one of these two teams are playing in the conference championship and not us.
Yeah, and I fully agree. You can't change the rule. You can't do it, even if it's messed up, even if it's wrong, even if we all know it's wrong. I feel once the season starts, this is the criteria in place. You will have to live with that criteria. Off season comes along, you can make that adjustment. But I fully agree with you. But you look at just the standings, and again, pretty interesting. Texas sits by itself at 6-1. You have Oklahoma State, Oklahoma, Iowa State, and Kansas State at 5-2, and the West Virginia, Texas Tech, and Kansas at 4-3. Again, a fascinating race for that second team, and Texas isn't exactly out of the woods yet either. They still got to make sure they take care of their business if they want to play in that title game, and they still have an outside shot at a potential college football playoff berth as well, which that race is fascinating about how that could all break down just with all the, undefeated teams still and one-loss teams that could be conference champions. The committee might have a pretty tough decisions to be made in the last, when that come December.
Yeah, and that's kind of the other thing I wanted to hit on because I'm so happy that this has happened in the final year because I think it's a very good case study for why we need an expanded playoff because we haven't really gotten that to this point. It seems like every year has been pretty cut and dry. Obviously, we have that first year with TCU and Baylor all technically being one-loss co-champions or whatever. But then I feel like that also got rectified by Ohio State, the team who jumped them in that conference championship game week, going on to win the national championship. That's as controversial as I feel like it's been. And to have them have to sit down and be like, we have to pick between 5 conference champions for 4 spots with 1 loss or less. Have fun. And just to see them have to pick apart, like, do we value the perfection like Florida State, or do we value, the resume more so, and then how does that factor in when you have a situation possibly like Washington and Oregon, who they each have 1 loss, but they're also to each other. Do we value the, and just to kind of be tossed into that. So I guess, well, one thing I want to get started with is what is your absolute best case scenario?
For what specifically? What's like
The
the
college football
committee or
playoff. Like, what are you rooting for this weekend to help push this situation into place?
I'm an agent of chaos. I love just sheer craziness. And there's multiple avenues you can go down for craziness. You can have top teams lose, Brandon. You can have all this stuff play out. I personally am not against seeing all those big dogs win, and then one of them is going to be left out, or a couple of them are going to be left out because they're going to get pissed off. I would howl if you have a situation where, a 11-1 Ohio State team gets left out, or 11-1 Michigan team gets left out, or a scenario where Oregon or Washington. I mean, they could potentially have that situation happen where that's a one-loss team that could be left out. I think the funniest one would be if Alabama found a way, and they wouldn't be kept out, by the way. I want to make this clear. If they went out, they beat Georgia in the SEC title game, but for some reason, since they lost to Texas or something along that nature, that it would keep either them or Georgia out, and they'd put Texas in if they were to win out. I just want like some traditional fan base just beyond ticked off because I need some message board material, and I need to spend a Sunday afternoon while I'm watching NFL football just reading angry message boards of a premier program. So that sounds like kind of humor to me. But with 2 weeks to go, I mean, there's still some wild games like Washington is playing Oregon State this weekend. They're an underdog. Oregon State's had a really great year in the Pac-2 or to be Pac-2. So for me personally, Brandon, I want chaos, and there's so many avenues of chaos, but I don't know. I just would love to see a team that actually might be deserving. If you're 12-1, win your conference championship in a Power 5 on paper, you should go more than likely. But there's a shot that could happen. There's only 4 spots, and there's 5 big conferences, so somebody's going to be left out in the cold. The easiest solution would be if Florida State lost at some point because they haven't played that great of a schedule. But they're 13-0. You can't keep them out. Simple as that.
Well, so let me throw this scenario out to you here, Drew Russell. Because I, just like you, I'm also a fan of chaos. So Michigan, Ohio State doesn't matter. Whoever wins that game, they're in.
Agreed.
And then Florida State, they stumble. They possibly lose to Louisville in the ACC championship game. I think because the ACC is so weak this year, I think both of those teams are toast.
Agreed.
Again, typical last year they're probably in. 2 years ago, 3 years ago, one-loss conference champion Louisville is in, which also would be fun, but not in this scenario. So the ACC is out. And then you have Washington. No. Then you have Oregon go beat Washington in. Okay, wait, I got to start over because the Michigan-Ohio State game does matter. Okay, so we're starting Black Friday.
Okay.
Black Friday weekend.
Okay.
Michigan beats Ohio State.
Okay.
And Auburn beats Alabama. That's a big if. That's this whole plan is contingent upon that.
Yep.
So now Alabama's got 2 losses, right? Oregon and Washington both win their next 2 games. They both win on Black Friday weekend. Florida State, it would be great if they lost. It would be great if Louisville lost. I don't think it's necessary for the situation. Could be, depending on how the playoff committee views it. But let's just say that they both win. And the conference championship weekend goes. Michigan blows out Iowa or Nebraska or whoever ends up in that god-awful Big Ten championship game. Now we have a 2-loss Alabama beating Georgia as a 1-loss non-champ. Okay. The ACC, Louisville beats Florida State. The ACC's toast. Oklahoma State or Iowa State, preferably Iowa State, beats Texas in the Big 12 championship game. So now Texas has 2 losses, non-champ, they're out. Then you have Oregon beating Washington. So now Oregon's a 1-loss champ. Washington's a 1-loss non-champ. I think that opens the door for Michigan, Ohio State, Washington, Oregon. Because I think Ohio State has such a good resume, they might sneak in the back over a 2-loss SEC champ, certainly over a 1-loss non-champ in Georgia with the schedule they've played, over a 2-loss Big 12 champ in Texas or Iowa State or however that comes out to be. And then the ACC, I think that both Washington and Ohio State with the non-conference championship is still a better resume than Florida State or Louisville with those 1 losses, respectively. So we cut out the whole East Coast and the whole Big 12 just for an all Big 10 Pac-12 matchup, which next year would be just an all Big 10 playoff.
Yeah, if I'm the Big 10 Twitter account, I'm throwing references if I get the 2 Big 10 and 2 Pac-12 teams and like, well, it's a conference battle. Can't wait for next year or something like that. That's a pretty interesting scenario. That'd be pretty funny. Seriously.
I think it'd be hilarious.
Looking at the rankings right now, we have got in the recent rankings, there are 9 teams, 5 are undefeated, and then 4 have 1 loss that are in that top 9. And there are other teams like Liberty's undefeated, but they're ranked 25th. Tulane's 9-1, but they're 17th. But you have Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State, Florida State, Washington, Oregon, Texas, Alabama, and Louisville. Louisville's an interesting team to me because they could go 12-1. They could win the next 2. They beat Florida State. I think Florida State is beatable. Very beatable.
I think so too.
And, I already can tell you from an easy standpoint, they go 12-1 and they went to conference championship, they're going to be left out.
And that's
like, I just feel like it's a guarantee.
Yeah.
I really fully believe that.
I almost feel like Florida State could even possibly suffer a loss because they beat up on LSU to start the season. But Louisville has no good wins outside of the ACC. And even the ACC hasn't provided a whole lot of great wins either.
Yeah. I mean, it's, you're dead right on Ohio State, Michigan. Whoever wins that, I don't think it matters. Like what they do in the Big Ten championship game, they're going to make it. I fully believe that.
But I do feel like for my doomsday scenario, it does have to be Michigan who wins because I don't think Michigan on their own accord has the resume to get in like Ohio State does. Because then I feel like that would open up the door for Georgia to sneak back in as a 1-loss non-champ or that 1-loss ACC champ sneaking in the back door over Michigan. I don't know if they get in over a 1-loss Ohio State team.
That's a good point. That's a really good point. There are so many scenarios, Brandon, and we're going to find out in the next 3 weeks. Probably their perfect world is that Georgia wins out. That's easy. No one's going to debate that. Whoever wins out between Ohio State and Michigan, nobody's going to debate that at 2. After that, I mean, if Washington wins out, I think Washington probably makes it. I would think so. You'd hope if they're a Pac-12 champ and they win out. And then if Florida State wins out, that'd be 4 undefeated teams, 4 different conference champions. That's probably the college football committee's like hope. Like if they don't want to make any tough decisions, if they don't want to sweat that Saturday night in some random upscale hotel boardroom, like that's their dream. Because I don't think they could justify like saying, you know what, Florida State, we know you're undefeated, you're a conference champ, but Texas beat Alabama. Like, I don't think they could justify it. But I could be wrong though. That's their dream. But I mean, if Alabama gets in and wrecks something or, I've heard over and over about the Big Ten West team winning that conference championship game and how much that would mess things up or at least create a little controversy. Those are just scenarios that are being thrown out there. So, but I think this is an 8-horse race. I feel bad for Louisville, but I mean, Louisville could win out. I just don't think they put them in.
Yeah, I think they're absolutely.
I just don't see it.
Looking at it as well.
So I mean, you have. Does this? Here's a question too. Next year we go 12 teams with the college football playoff, and all these teams would make it more than likely between conference champs and at-larges.
Mm-hmm.
Is this good for college football that all those teams get an opportunity to play for a national championship? Or do you kind of like that margin of error is so slim to compete for a national championship? Because that's the thing I'm going to miss about like a 4-team playoff is that like the margin of error is pretty much next to none. Like you can't butcher it.
True. Yeah, and I think if you're pushing an anti-expansion agenda, it's going to revolve around the concept of, well, it's going to diminish the regular season. And there's a good possibility it can, but at least on like the very top end, like when we get to, I don't even want to bring up like the conference championships games because those have been awful. Those outside of this year, where it's going to be Washington, Oregon, hopefully playing for a college football playoff spot, Georgia and Alabama, possibly playing for a college football playoff spot. But generally, last year they were really bad. Um,
Right.
but so I think this expanded playoff is gonna elevate the floor just enough to where it's gonna kind of make up for some of that top end intensity. And I think that there's still enough incentive for you to win your conference championship game, for you to be one of the top two teams in the country as opposed to the third best team in the country. You get a whole week off, and then you get a
Mhm.
host of game on campus. And for a
Yep.
team like Michigan or Ohio State, yeah, USC, come on down to Ann Arbor in January or in late December. Have fun with that. And so I think that they did such a good job building incentives to where that doesn't diminish the regular season. Because that's one of the things I think is so special the about college football is the fact that every week matters. I mean, we just saw
Right.
the stinky Denver Broncos beat up on Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen, and there's a good fair chance none of that will matter at all
Hmm.
in the grand scheme of things. For college football, I mean, you can't slip up like that,
Yeah,
and I don't think that you're
and
going to
this
be
is
allowed
part
to
of
slip up in this next realm as well.
right, and this is probably part of a larger arc discussion as well because you know I don't like watered down products. Everybody has their own reason for watching sports. I love it. I love watching teams execute game plans. I love watching teams how they win. I mean, there's so many ways to win a sporting contest. But I also watch because I want to be entertained as well. Sports are entertainment, and they're excellent entertainment. What I'm curious about is that with the going to 12, I'm happy that they are allowed. And I think I view it as like a college basketball situation where if they allow, a conference champion to make the big dance no matter what, I think that's fantastic. But I am curious if it does water down the regular season somewhat. That you can afford to lose once or twice now and still make the college football playoff. And I think is that good for college football or not going forward? It probably is because people love playoffs in the United States in general. Like people get hyped up for the playoffs. I personally enjoy the regular season. I want the regular season to matter. And I don't like when it's watered down. Like college basketball, the NCAA tournament is one of the greatest things on earth. I don't like that low and mid majors, and I know they have to do it for revenue reasons. I don't like that they play an 18, 20 game conference schedule in January and February. And then if you're a one seed, you could just lose in a conference tournament, in the championship game. And well, that's too bad. You're not playing
Yeah.
in the NCAA tournament. And I personally have a problem with that of a team playing really good basketball for 2 months, being focused that long, and then, hey, maybe they do slip up. I don't know. I'm just kind of curious in the future of it. It's great entertainment, though. This has been a very kind of similar to the BCS's final year, where you had just kind of some mayhem and chaos. But it's kind of similar with the final year of the 14 playoff.
Yeah, I think there's a good to fair chance it diminishes September quite a bit because
Yes.
I think there's also opportunity for a precedent to be set this year where head to head matters. Having a blemish matters when you're going up against resumes with no blemishes, i.e., Alabama versus Texas or Florida State. And so I think that really disincentivizes those good non conference games, which is a
Yes.
bummer. But I do think it'll elevate November so much. Because not only,
True.
because first of all, the conference championship games moving forward, assuming they all get their rule verbiage right, which I guess isn't a given at this stage in the game. Looking at you, Big 12, but every one of those games is a automatic qualifier. Not to say that we're going to get a situation like this, but there were okay. So here's a good situation. There were rumbles earlier this year where if Virginia Tech had beaten Louisville, they're going to go to the ACC championship game after losing to Purdue and Rutgers. And all of a sudden,
Yep.
they get hot. They take down Florida State. They're in the playoffs. How exciting is that?
Yeah.
And then more likely than not, we're just going to get a really good conference championship game. We're going to get Alabama, Georgia. We're going to get Michigan and Oregon, or Washington and Ohio State, the two best Big Ten teams coming out of there. And then even leading up to that, teams, I hate to say it, but like Eastern Iowa right now at 16, you think, hey, we win out, we're going to end up 10-2. We might have an outside shot. We don't have a starting quarterback. We just lost Cooper DeJean. We just lost our best player, and we still have a shot. We got 2 games that we're going to be pretty big favorites in, and we got a shot. So all those games get excited. All Penn State.
That's a good point.
Their season's done at this point in this game. Next year, it won't be. They're sitting at, I think, 11. They're right in the thick of it as long as they take care of business here these next 2 weeks. And it goes down probably throughout the whole rankings. You have the group of 5 conversation where you're like, well, first of all, if James Madison is eligible, are they going to get in? Or if they're not, that's a unique storyline. But then you have them versus Tulane. Then on the flippity flop, like Tulane has 1 loss, but it's to Ole Miss. Does that elevate them? Because I think it's going to elevate November and December so much more than what we have now. And I'm okay with, losing September, because I also worth mentioning in September, we're just so juiced to have college football back. Like,
yes,
I'm fine with having a couple of stinkers.
Yes, and see that's the perfect counterpoint to my point, Brandon. Like, I do like that potential where maybe a team plays poorly in September, doesn't get off to a great start, but gets hot late. It is very exciting to potentially have that thought process go down. And like as an Iowa State fan, they wouldn't be in the discussion even if it was in that 12-team situation. But say they do beat, Kansas the week before, they get hot and find a way to get a 10-3 season, win Big 12 championship. Like, I'm ecstatic. Like, I'm hyped up because I know that that's an automatic berth into the college football playoff. And I'm pretty invested this week, very clearly. But I'd be probably even more invested knowing that there is that shot of getting in. And I think casting that wider net, they're hoping brings in more interest, more excitement for fan bases come October, November, and December. And I do think it is going to be a winning formula probably going forward. I'm just still fascinated if it will delude that regular season a little bit, and I think it will. But at the same time, I think that trade-off, what you mentioned, Brandon, is dead right, that you're going to potentially get more excited fan bases. And even the top teams, as you said, will still be rewarded with a bye, have that might get even a more favorable matchup in the quarterfinals, and we'll get those opportunities to go advance and play for a national championship.
Yeah, and I think, and that last point, I think is gonna be what brings us all together. Because obviously, on the bottom end, it's gonna make it so much more interesting at the bottom end of that college football playoff bracket. But you mentioned March Madness, and you're absolutely right. If you're, the number 1 team in the country and you slip up in your conference championship tournament, and what happens? You fall from like maybe a 1 to a 2 seed, maybe a 2 to a 3, or this or that. Imagine if the conference champion got to just skip that first weekend, and how much bigger of a deal, how much more intriguing that would make it for teams like Georgia and Michigan, who, they should win their conference championship game, but the stakes are so much higher now that it's like it either goes from, getting a bye and hosting a game, ideally in the second weekend of the postseason, or you go on the road and possibly take on a team that you don't want that matchup with. And just a whole extra game, a whole extra week of rest, as you saw in the NFL playoff model, is a huge deal, especially in football where you get beat up. So I think I think they nailed it. I think the one thing that they didn't get right, which is only as a matter of hindsight, is the 6-and-6 method, where it's the 6 best conference champions get the bid. Because if I'm reading this court stuff right, the Pac-12 is still going to be a conference.
Yes.
As long as Washington State and Oregon State want it to be a conference.
Yep.
So as everything is written, one of those 2 teams will make the college football playoff next year.
which is absolutely crazy. And that's why they're fighting so hard. If you're a mid-major school out west, that's a pretty amazing appetizer of like, hey, come join this new refined Pac-12. You get an automatic berth, TV money. If you can find the right markets, maybe we can keep it at a respectable level. But you're dead right, Brandon. How it's written, they've earned that position. Or maybe those two schools would just say, you know what? Nobody joins. We're going to find they'll have lawyers working nonstop to make sure that, hey, one of these two teams is going to be playing in this thing, whether you like it or not. They had a 12-game series this year, and Oregon State beat Washington State 8-4. So they're going to be playing for it. I don't know, but it's a fascinating debate. And this would be a pretty good year for a 12-team playoff, just because there'd be so many intriguing storylines. But I think those incentives of winning your conference championship to get a bye is a fantastic one. But that said, though, I do love the mental gymnastics you have to play overall in terms of trying to get ready for like how to get to these four teams. Or man, just imagine the old school BCS 2 teams. Imagine if we had like 4 or 5 undefeated teams and that computer has to start crunching numbers of which 2 teams play for a national championship. That would have been this would have been a fun year for that.
And also, quick little sidebar. I think we got to bring the BCS system back. Not the
I agree,
but the rankings. Like it makes no sense to me that you have a couple of these university administrators. You have a dozen of them coming from across the country, and they're deciding the whole fate of college football. Now, it hasn't been consequential yet because I found a website that does the BCS calculations, and it's worked out the same every year. Yeah. But it's just a crazy system that we went from, well, we got a mix of these 65 credentialed journalists whose job it is to rank college football teams. And then part computer system that blends in the gap between that and the human error. And then you step back and say, we want all humans. And not only do we want all humans, we don't want the writers whose livelihoods depend on writing about college football. We want it to be the administrators of those schools.
I know.
Is insane to me.
Right. There's no bias with the BCS. It was just numbers. That's how it was. And I'm sure they have all that data accessible to them. And they're going to be doing their homework. I'm not saying they're not, but there was no bias with it. I'm with you. I would love to see that brought back as how to pick the at-large teams. I think that'd be a potentially fair system. Maybe I'm going to get ripped. I don't care. I think it wasn't the worst system. At times, it didn't play any no politics with the BCS. Yeah. It was just sheer numbers. I always like that.
We're back in a great time for Big 12 football because what a last couple of weeks is going to turn into here. Just kind of scrolling through the last week here. I can't share my screen because of Spectrum, so shout out Spectrum. But a couple of games worth mentioning. Iowa State pulled it off over BYU. In the pick, and you had that. I missed out on that. I think I had to play the numbers here. We both had Kansas State over Baylor. That one was pretty easy. That one I didn't have any sweat for. Oklahoma and West Virginia. The first drive, I was like, hey, West Virginia, they came to play. After that, it was all Sooners. We both had Oklahoma there, so no fret there. And then Texas Tech and Kansas, ugly game. Kansas on QB3 at this point. But Texas Tech got it done. It was an ugly game. They pulled out. I had Texas Tech. You had Kansas. Finally pulled out to pulled the game on you, and then we both whiffed in Disney World.
We sure did.
That
was a confidence level of 10 when I picked that. I felt pretty good.
Yeah, that would be a fun system, as if we were ranking the games that we'd be most confident in. That would have been a 10 for me, without a doubt.
Yeah,
maybe Kansas State over Baylor, just because how much respect we give to Arthur Gustavo Malzahn.
That should be a feature since we shouldn't be changing rules this year, like the Big 12. We'll keep our current system, but next year
we'll review that in the offseason.
I like that confidence system where you could potentially get more points. But if you miss, then you get hammered. Like if you're confidence of 10 and then you're like, they lose, you're like, boy, you just got docked big points.
Yeah.
could have a point
Well, and
system.
I mean, if you look at it this way, in our pick'em after this week, you're 7 games up on me. You're not hurting if you lose that game. However, if I had put Kansas State as my 10-point game and you put Oklahoma State as your 10-point game, I mean, it could change the
Could change
maybe
it
we'll do that for
all.
basketball once we get into the basketball swing of things.
We'll work that out. Yeah,
But
I like
again,
that.
once the season starts, you can't change the rules. I feel like that's pretty well understood.
We really did already document that fully on this podcast. So I want to make that very clear.
Another split decision. Cincinnati pulled it off against Houston. How many snaps in that game did you watch, Drew Russell?
Don't put me out. Don't put me on the spot like that. I'm not going to lie to the people of America. I did not watch one snap, but I did watch the highlights. I did watch the highlights, which I was one of the few. And big win for Cincy. Hey, they're fun. Yeah. Everybody has got to win in the Big 12 this season. So kudos to Cincy. Kudos to Cincy. Still in the cellar, but kudos.
And there's a good fair chance that you still watched more snaps than I did, because I didn't even go through the highlights. Maybe like a couple came through my Twitter feed that I subconsciously watched, but yeah, there was not a minute of voluntary consumption with that game. So, but yeah, shout out Cincinnati getting their first win as a Big 12 team in conference play. Granted, it's against Houston. It'd be great to get a win against a hateful 8 team, but nonetheless, a win's a win.
Win's a win.
Win's a win.
Win's a win.
And for that staff in their first year, that's been a struggle. You take any win that you can. And then last 100%. One, it looked a little bit dicey there at the end, but Texas ended up pulling it out against TCU. I will be honest, I was very frustrated at this game. I went to bed at halftime. So I don't know how TCU came back. I don't know if it was, good fortune on their end or bad luck by the Longhorns, but
I mean, kind of a mix on that game, Brandon. I mean, TCU, I'll gotta hand it to them. They did not give up. Texas, I mean, Brooks touchdown late third quarter. They're up 20. They hit cruise control in the fourth. They thought this is going to be a sleeper, but TCU quickly drove down. And I mean, they gave it themselves an opportunity after a couple of turnovers or a turnover from Texas to potentially, be in that game and win that game, but it just wasn't enough. And for Texas, I think kind of a stark reminder, you got to play 4 quarters because there's still teams out for blood on you. But they find a way to get the job done, and they're in good position for TCU. Man, what a tough year. Just a tough season for a team that was in the national championship game last year. So you kind of have to feel for them for sure.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. And, shout out to Texas, which I hate to do, but I mean, that felt like a game where they could have absolutely overlooked TCU and almost looked like that they were going to for a little bit there. But they've been focused. They've been dialed in. They get past Kansas, which has been a thorn in their heel. They fall in Red River, but other than that, they've taken care of business. Wyoming gave them a good run for their money. They've been dialed in, so shout out to them. They're earning exactly everything that they're getting here.
Yeah, I think the most disappointing performance of the week for a Big 12 team is Kansas, and I know that they're going through, quarterback instability right now. It's the most important position in the game, so I don't want to rip it, but still a disappointing loss at home against Texas Tech, and a game that they still had an opportunity to win. Lance Leipold, I think, did everything he could with, Cole Ballard at QB, but they found some success on the ground, and I still don't think they ran it for 45 times to 25 pass attempts, so they're trying to, find that right balance behind. But if they had continued to pound that run game a little bit more and take it out of Ballard's hands, I think they could have maybe found a way to win it. When you're on a third string QB, it's tough to be the worst, most disappointing team of the week. But for a team that had a shot at potentially playing in that Big 12 championship game, that's going to sting no matter what. But there's still been that doesn't take away from Kansas' season. It's still been a fantastic year for the Jayhawks.
Yeah. Fantastic year, but QB3, you really are just trying to eat up stuff.
Yeah, and it might be a strong phrase for me to use the term most disappointing team of the weekend. There's probably Oklahoma State. You know what? I better make sure I've got everything accurate, Brandon. Yeah. Oklahoma State probably is a little bit of a stronger case. I'll take that back completely. I'm just dead wrong, America.
Yeah.
Oklahoma State was the most disappointing team of the weekend.
That game against UCF might be the single most disappointing game of the Big 12 season. I mean, I'm sure that there's a couple like early non-conference games that, a team like Iowa State would want back, but right after you just get in the in the winner's lap, ready to hit this home stretch, 3 very winnable games, and then get your teeth kicked in by Arthur Gustavo Malzahn and company. I mean,
what's interesting.
That might be the most disappointing game in the country.
I don't disagree. Like Oklahoma State's season is pretty interesting. That they start 2-0, then we both remember that South Alabama game where they lose by 26 at home, lose to Iowa State in competitive fashion, and then win 5 straight. 5 straight in this winning streak. Beat Kansas State, good team. Kansas, good team. West Virginia's a bowl team. And Oklahoma, their hated rival, get that big win over Bedlam. I mean, they were cruising. And there was no signs to either one of us and to, I'd say, anybody nationally. Maybe an upset. Upsets happen in college football. Everybody's susceptible to them. But to lose by 42 is simply stunning for a team that they win out. They're playing in the conference championship.
Yep.
No debate. No one's fighting it. And, Alan Bowman was not good with the football with the 3 interceptions. Like, it was stunning. And it really does kind of put this bizarre Big 12 season in more that topsy-turvy world that we just don't know what we're going to get, Brandon. And that's what makes it interesting. But for Oklahoma State, this was a bitter pill to swallow. Still a very nice slate to end the year at Houston, BYU. But when we were going through Texas, Oklahoma State schedules last week, I think Texas would be the one to slip up. Way more likely than Oklahoma State, but that's college sports.
Yeah. Another crazy week this week. Oklahoma State, we'll get started with them. They go on the road to Houston. Like another game where they should win and should win comfortably, where you look at the talent and what they've been able to do against the higher end teams in the Big 12. And you think, well, they can just execute 75% of that. They're going to come away with a win, but maybe not so sure. However, I'm not veering that far off the path now. I'm taking Oklahoma State here.
Yeah, Houston, I think has found better football throughout this season. They've been, they beat West Virginia on that miracle Hail Mary. They go down and get a road win over a Baylor team that is having a dreadful season right now. And because Coach Arnaiz, he's kind of he might not be around. We'll find out, obviously, but I'm fully with you. I think Coach Van Gundy, I'm sure that was not a fun week of practice right now in Stillwater. I'm going to Oklahoma State as well, Brandon, but that's an interesting game overall that they're only a touchdown favorite, which to me is a little bit surprising. That's not a little bit more, but that shows kind of maybe Vegas being a little uncertain about the Cowboys right now.
And now I'm looking at this, a lot of stinkers. We'll kind of just knock those out here real quick. The newly deemed Blue Bonnet Bowl, which nobody's happy about in those circles, especially with a unofficial name as cool as the Revivalry. And they botched it there. But I think you could also name this the Moral Victory Bowl, where none of these teams are going to accomplish anything this season. But boy, if you're just looking for just a moral victory, beating up on your rival late in the season, maybe that keeps some steam in the engine. I'll take the home team here. Give me TCU. I think Baylor is just a disaster, and I think we may be seeing the end of Dave Aranda.
Yeah, I'm with you, Brennan. TCU, again, showed some fight last week, even though home games have not been kind to them this season. I do want to make that very clear. They have really not played very well in Fort Worth. Only one or a couple home victory or 3 home victories on the season. So not as bad as maybe I think, but they've, they're they're a tough team. I think they win as well. Keep that bowl eligibility alive. They'd have to win the last 2 to get there.
Yeah. Tough road for them, but still doable. Still doable here. Cincinnati and West Virginia, good Eastern Seaboard kind of battle here in Morgantown. Cincinnati picking up their first Big 12 win last week. Do you think they pick up number 2 against it and pick up one against the Hateful Eight here?
Yeah, I'm gonna go no. I think we're gonna get those couches ready to go for this week in West Virginia. Team that, again, give them a lot of credit. They've hung around last week. Kind of a tough loss, as you mentioned, Brendan. They got off to a really nice start against Oklahoma last week, but couldn't sustain that. I think they get right this week and find another victory to what has been a surprisingly nice season for the Mountaineers.
No kidding. Former Big East matchup, too. I think that's pretty cool. This would be the kind of rivalry that maybe protect if you're in that kind of thing. I guess not.
I mean, no, we're not into that here at the Big 12, Brandon. We're not into that.
Not into that. We'll change the rules in the middle of the season. We'll break up century-long rivalries. That's the Big 12 motto there. Give me West Virginia too. I don't have any. This might be another game, admittedly, that's a zero snapper for me. But I'll do the Drew Russell method. I'll turn on the highlights afterwards. At least get a indication of playmaking there. But yeah, Russell for Cincinnati going on the road, not easy. Up next, the last time that these two will play as conference opponents, Oklahoma and BYU. Real long-standing rivalry being tossed down the drain by the selfishness of Oklahoma. That's a bummer. In Provo, I don't know what time that game is. I can't imagine they make Oklahoma go there at night. But
yeah, that's an 11. That's a 10 a.m. local kick.
I mean, even more so, give me Oklahoma.
Yeah, that's a 10 a.m. local kick.
That's tough.
And I want to kind of, and you talked about kind of this slate of games this weekend, Brandon, not being great. I think the TV networks aren't against you on that. That was an ESPN game. Cincinnati, West Virginia is ESPN Plus. Baylor, TCU, ESPN Plus.
Wow.
Oklahoma State, Houston is ESPN 2. UCF, Texas, FS2. That tells you everything you need to know. Somewhere. Kansas State, Kansas is FS1, and then Texas, Iowa State is Fox. I thought that was ABC, but it says Fox, so I'll go with that for now.
I thought it would have been FS1. Well, I guess. Okay. All right.
So that's that. But yes, a 10 a.m.
game on the network.
At least something, because it's kind of limited. But yeah, Oklahoma, BYU, Oklahoma, pretty heavy favorite. BYU, kind of similar to a couple other teams in the conference, going through kind of some quarterback situations right now. They still haven't named a starting quarterback as of Wednesday night. So that tells you kind of what BYU is going through. So, boy, as much as I love chaos, I don't see it in this game. I've got to go Oklahoma. But I do want to give a big shout to BYU and their fan base. Very accommodating. Iowa State was there last week. Nothing but positive reviews. And for Iowa State fans, of course, Jack Trice Stadium. The story of Jack Trice is a phenomenal story. And BYU did a 10-minute piece on it I saw today on X, formerly known as Twitter. And it was really well done. So shout out to BYU. Big fan of their fan base and part of a whole group of classy fan bases here in the Big 12.
No kidding. No better place to be. Unfortunately, we're going to taint that with the other team in Utah next year. Those are not as nice. But we'll cherish. We'll welcome in BYU.
We'll cherish. Yeah, of course.
Very, very happy to hear that. Let's see. Up next, let's get into Central Florida and Texas Tech. What a conference battle this is. I mean, we're really getting into the weeds. Where are you going here, Drew Russell? My strategy is just going to be picking the opposite of you, so we'll see.
All right. Okay. I figured, and that's okay. And as much as I think Texas Tech definitely got right last week, but the allure of Gus Malzahn is calling my name. And even though it's in Lubbock and I know it gets chaos, and it is a Arkansas fan who they're Mr. Gus's name has been being thrown around as a potential coaching candidate.
Wow.
That's been and that's a whole nother discussion when we'll get to our coaching carousel episode in a couple of weeks. But that's kind of an interesting game. But yeah, I'm going UCF. I'm going to say the Golden Knights find a way to be bowl eligible. So I'm gonna go with that, and that's a bowl eligible game right there as well, Brent. The winner of that game will be bowl eligible. So
The Bowl.
the bowl.
Not
the NBA player.
Yeah, not the NBA player.
Yeah,
It's so funny to me whenever he makes like any type of basket. They're like, now is the time for Bowl. Bowl's not happening.
Dude's a freak.
Bowl happening. He's a freak. He's very fun to watch, but he's not it.
Somebody needs to get a photo of Bull there this weekend. Be lifting that up. I will understand the reference. No one else might understand, but I'll put it together. I'll put it together.
So yeah, I guess that leaves me with Texas Tech. I don't feel horrible about it. As Joey McGuire is putting together some pieces here late, maybe trying to build some momentum into the offseason, this would be an opportunity to do so.
They are a favorite at home, so they, on paper should win, but we'll see.
Let's see. Now I think that brings us to the two games I'm actually really excited about. So we'll start with the Sunflower Showdown in Kansas State and Kansas. Both teams real weird to get a gauge on. I'll take the team with 2 quarterbacks versus the team with 0 quarterbacks. Give me the Wildcats. Probably pretty big here, I'd say.
Yeah, it's an in-state rivalry game. It's in Lawrence. A matchup that I think has the potential to be very interesting. I'm curious what Lance Leipold will do with the QB position. They've got a good running game. Crowd's going to be really into it. But K-State is just tough. I mean, they're just a tough program. And they've got more consistent QB play. They've got a good, well-rounded team. I think they find win number 8. And they're still very motivated to play in a conference championship game as well. So I got to go K-State as well, Brendan. I really do. As tempted as I am to take the upset with a team that does not have an established QB right now, I'm going to go with the road team in K-State.
Now, what I feel like is the big one, and whether or not it's the most competitive, who knows? I sure hope so, but certainly the most consequential as far as conference championships and even national championship scenarios are concerned. Texas going to Jack Trice at night, just as we had talked about a few weeks ago, just as we had hoped. But before we pick this, going into the Kansas game, would you rather scenario A, you beat Kansas, you lose to Texas at home, or would you rather lose to Kansas and beat Texas at home?
Good question. I don't know. If I had to choose right now, I think most years I'd actually rather beat Kansas than Texas, since that's more of a regional rival. I guess I know personally more Kansas fans than Texas fans. This year, though, I do want Texas. You want that, right? I mean, you put the horns down. I understand that. So, yeah, I think Iowa State fans want this game bad. And if they find a way to win this game, that's something they're going to enjoy all off season because Texas loses this game, Brandon, they're done. There's no way they're making the college football playoff. No chance at two losses. And Iowa State fans would just love it if they've got that.
Goosebumps just thinking about it.
Oh, seriously, it's hard not to. And for Texas, I mean, they're going to be plenty motivated. I actually think almost that collapse last week probably helped the coaches probably get a little more of a intense practice week of like, you can't do that again. But I don't care. I know the numbers don't even remotely back me, but the narrative's too good. I got to go Iowa State. I don't care, Brandon. I have to. It probably won't. Quinn Ewers played great football. Texas is just a great overall team. But that said, though, they have had lapses this season where they do not look fully dialed in. And I'm sure Matt Campbell, great performance in Provo last week. I'm sure he's reminding them, hey, a couple weeks ago you weren't dialed in that first half against Kansas. And I'm sure that message is being spread of you better be ready to go on Saturday night. And I think that team will be plenty hyped up in Jack Trice. And even though I'm not getting snow on the ground, Brandon, it should be a nice, crisp, late fall evening. Can't be beat.
Should be perfect. And I think, and I'm going with Iowa State too. And I think the point that you bring up is that Kansas game is that you do have a case study of, hey, when we're not dialed in, we got our teeth kicked in by QB2 over in Lawrence. What do you think Quinn Ewers and company is going to do?
Yeah.
I think it's also worth mentioning Brooks down with the torn ACL. He's cooked.
Yep.
That's a huge
point.
loss for the Longhorns.
Excellent point.
And yeah, if Iowa State can just, and now this is a tough ask for college student athletes, but they can just do what they did last week. I think they're going to absolutely be in it. Jack Trice is going to be probably as electric as possible. On Saturday night. So that's going to be outstanding. And so, yeah, give me the Clones by 1,000,000.
Yeah, Iowa State still has won 4 of their last 5 games. I mean, they're still playing some really good football in general. It will come down to who can fill in for Brooks. And that's something that we haven't dialed a lot into yet with this Texas team. I mean, this is a major loss in Brooks. He is a incredible tailback. You know, to replace a guy who's a first-round pick last year in Robinson and to play how he has this year has been really, really impressive. How do they find an answer for that? And do they find an answer for that? And I don't know. Iowa State's going to be ready to go, though. There's no question about that. And we'll see how dialed in Texas is early. I think if Texas can establish something in that first half or really find momentum, I do think they find a way to walk out of there with an upset. But I'm going to say they don't. I'm going to say Iowa State's ready to go. So we'll see.
Let's see. Well, perfect. Should be an outstanding week, a Big 12 play. Who knows what the scenarios will be next time that we hop on here. Maybe they change the rules. Maybe they change, maybe instead of 60 minutes, it's 65 minutes. Wow, reevaluate everything. This is the time for it.
Hey, I'm not against getting back to our old college OT rules. I kind of want to go 8-9 overtimes with teams starting from the 25-yard line again. I don't want this. I don't want the 2-point conversions over and over. I want the old school, OT rules back. It was the best OT rules on earth. But
you're absolutely right. Yeah,
maybe we can change that the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, this is the time to change the rules. So, well, perfect, Drew Russell. That's all I had. Anything else you'd like to add before we sign off for the evening?
Well, all I'm going to tell America is get ready to loosen those belts, because with Thanksgiving around the corner and all this great college and NFL football as well, but college football, I'm not going to be leaving the couch too much the next couple of weeks. So exercise is optional, and there's going to be a lot of dessert consumed in the coming weeks. So it's a great time to be a football fan.
Absolutely. Last thing, just good old horns down.
Put that down.